CWPA Remote Professional Edition, where we take a look at water polo players and where they are today.
This man was a member of the Fordham University Rams men's varsity water polo team from 1968 to 1972. After graduating with degrees in political science and German, he went to American University and obtained his master's in public affairs journalism. Years later, he obtained a second master's degree, this time from Johns Hopkins University in international public policy and international economics. Now, he is the director of economics and policy analysis at the American Sugar Association. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Jack Roney. Jack, thanks so much for appearing on CWPA Remote.
Thank you for having me, George. It's an honor to be here with you.
Well, it's an honor to have you. So let's get right to it. How and why did you choose Fordham?
Well, I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and was interested in going to a good Catholic school. I was attracted by the Jesuit education. The idea of living in New York City was exciting to me. And I got to be away from home, but not too far, 2 hours from home. I had 4 younger brothers and sisters that I actually enjoyed being around. So Fordham was the perfect solution for me, easy to get home on the occasional weekend.
All right. Well, do you remember your first water polo practice?
I do, because I had never played water polo before. Those of us who went to Fordham to swim, and I was able to pick up a partial scholarship, were required to play water polo. And once I got started on that, I realized how boring swimming is compared to water polo. We were playing a game. We were tossing a ball around as hard as we could, learning how to catch a wet ball, and sprinting up and down the pool. And I just loved it from the outset. And I was not in an unusual situation, because there was only one other player on my Fordham team who had ever played water polo before. And that happened to be Ned Kelly, who for many, many years had the record for the most goals ever scored by a Fordham player in a year or in a game. And what a privilege it was to get to play with him. But he was a couple years younger than I, but he was our mentor as we moved along, because he had more experience than any of us did. But we had a great coach in Joe Burnell, and he brought us along, teaching us the game and learning that being in good shape really helps, but it's the real finesse. It's the finesse that you see that I think really sets the best players apart, who can really do the pinpoint passing and positioning and so on. So it was just fascinating in the years I spent at Fordham learning playing water polo. I was learning all the time.
Mm-hmm. And how about your first game? Do you remember it?
Well, I do remember most vividly the game in which I scored my first goal. That was
going to be my next question, so go for it.
Yeah. We're at Cornell, and I played mostly defense, but came up on offense occasionally. And I got the opportunity and scored a goal. And I was just so thrilled. I looked to my nearest teammate, and I guess I didn't know what to do. And so I gave him a hug. And of course, we both sank. We were both having trouble breathing already, and there we were sinking. And we came up, and I developed a theory since then that it must have been water polo players who invented high fives, because you don't hug another water polo player
for sure
after you score a goal. So I think that's what we began doing after that. But that was a thrill for me. I have a warm place in my heart for Cornell ever since.
All right. And do you have a single best memory of your water polo career at Fordham?
Well, I think the most exciting game ever was my senior year, when we upset a couple of teams. We upset MIT and Bucknell in the Eastern Championships. We were there by invitation, but we were a low seed. And we were absolutely thrilled to be able to make it to the finals against a school called Yale, which I think you know a little bit about, George. And,
I might.
Yeah. And so Yale at that time, of course, had been the powerhouse of the East in water polo, a powerhouse of the country in swimming. with the likes of Don Scholander and John Nelson. And when we made it to the finals against Yale, it was so thrilling. I mean, just the thought that we might pull off another upset and make it out to California for the finals. We were not successful, despite the fact that I was guarding John Nelson, who had won 3 Olympic medals, a gold, a silver, and a bronze in the 2 previous Olympics. But those were in swimming and not in water polo. And I had the experience while trying to guard John Nelson of someone swimming away from me faster than anyone ever had in my life. He was just a stroke faster than everyone else in that pool. And that was pretty amazing. I was able to hold him scoreless, and he held me scoreless with the help from an outstanding goaltender on that Yale team, who I recently put together, was you. So thank you very much for shelling me in that game. I did not score at all, and for keeping Yale in the game to beat Fordham. But I think we gave you a pretty good game that day, and that was really the highlight of my career to have made it that far. It was a nice way to end my career as well.
For sure. Any disappointments along the way?
Well, I think that it was, excuse me, it was really, it's hard to say there was ever a disappointment. I did have the unusual circumstance of spending my junior year in Germany. So I was away from my young water polo career for a full year. And that was kind of tough, coming back in, a new crop of guys on the team by the time I got back from my senior year. But I was able to work my way back into the system, and that worked out. That worked out very well. It was wonderful to have the opportunity to travel to other universities, to form friendships with my teammates, and to learn a new sport. And I think it served me incredibly well.
Any amusing stories that happened that you can tell on air?
There are a couple, George. A couple come to mind. One was, I mentioned Ned Kelly, the fantastic scorer that we had. And we were playing in 71. We were playing against Villanova, which happened to be my father's school. But we were playing really well. Ned was playing really well. He scored 11 goals in that game. But
that's pretty
the
well.
one that I will never forget was a goal that Ned Kelly kicked in. I'd never seen that before in a water polo game. I'd seen him do it in practice, but never in a game before. But it was a deal where he faked the goalie with his hand and then went on his back, threw his foot up, and literally kicked the ball into the goal. Now, I have to tell you, in Ned Kelly's defense, and we won handily that day against Villanova, so we were way ahead. But after the game, he felt terrible about what he had done, and went over and personally apologized to the Villanova coach and the team and said, I didn't mean to show you guys up. I'm sorry, I just got carried away with the moment. But I just thought that reflected incredible character on Ned's part, which was kind of a lesson for all of us. The other quick story, George, I love playing basketball too. I was the tallest guy on our team. I'm 6'4", or I was 6'4" then. I'm close to 6'2" now. But when we were playing in a pool that was only 4 feet deep at one end, which we had to do occasionally, and was really kind of a nuisance. So you're always kind of on your side while you're playing. And I was on defense and saw a forward bringing the ball up, and he telegraphed a pass to the guy I was guarding. And so I brought my feet up way far underneath me, underneath my butt, and gave a tremendous scissor kick, went up higher than I ever had before, and intercepted the pass. The ref immediately called a penalty on me for jumping off the bottom. And so I was somewhat complimented that he thought I must have done that. So I never got called for goaltending in basketball, but I did get that call in water polo. I will, as a postscript, I will say that I very politely went to the ref afterwards, after the game, and explained to him, in case I faced him again sometime, that I really could do that. And I got in the pool and showed him again how I could get up that high with a big kick. But that was one of the more amusing things, I guess, that happened to me in a water polo match.
Yeah, frustrating too at the time, I'm sure.
Oh, it was.
Before we get into your current situation, Tell us a bit about how you got into the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Well, I after my years at Fordham, I actually taught high school mathematics at Father Judge High School in Philadelphia for a year. And while I was doing that, I was applying to graduate schools. And the graduate school that I chose was American University in Washington, D.C. And that was where I think, based on my water polo experience, I tried something new and went out for rugby, and ended up playing 3 seasons of rugby while I was at AU. And the first rugby game I played in was the first rugby game I'd ever seen. I went to one practice and they inserted me in a game the following weekend. But I figured, well, if I could learn water polo on the run, I could learn rugby as well. But while I was doing my graduate work in journalism at American University, there was an opportunity to do some part-time work at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I had no particular agriculture background, but I got in there and started writing about really interesting issues like world hunger and international trade. And when I graduated from American, they offered me a full-time job. And so that was how this kid from the suburbs of Philadelphia ended up spending a career in agriculture. I spent 15 years at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and following that, the last 4 years I was there, I happened to be their lead commodity analyst on sugar. And the Hawaiian sugar growers asked me to become their Washington representative because they wanted someone to represent them who knew Washington well, which by that time I did. And that then, I also, by that time, had gone back to school and done a master's in international economics at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. So that gave me some additional credibility in the economics area. And so I then have spent most of my career as an economist, essentially a lobbyist for the American sugar producers in Washington. And I'll tell you, George, there's kind of an analogy when I reflect on water polo. I started out in goal. I played forward for a bit, and we eventually kind of settled in on defense. But what I was really doing was, learning the game and learning different skills. And with my professional career, there's been a kind of a parallel in the sense that I had studied political science at Fordham. I studied journalism in graduate school, and I studied economics in graduate school. And you put that all together, and it worked out very well for my job as a lobbyist, because I had to understand the political system. I had to be able to write well, and I had to be able to understand economics. And my teaching experience has been critical because if you're a lobbyist in Washington, I think the best analogy for that is educator. You're trying to teach people somewhat interested in your subject a lot in a short amount of time. And so you kind of put that all together, and you have the kind of work that I've done. So I feel blessed that I've had the opportunity to use a variety of skills in my work and kind of pull those all together and feel challenged every day.
Can you educate our viewers about what a lobbyist does? I mean, everybody probably has a general idea. Okay, I want to get something for the people I represent.
Yeah.
But what does a typical work week look like for you?
Well, it is. I think as much as anything, it's doing a lot of reading and acquainting ourselves with what's going on in the market. For me, dealing with a commodity, I'm always looking at supply and demand type of issues for sugar. And then we're following Washington congressional activities, looking at opportunities to secure legislation that's helpful to our constituents. And we're looking at the executive branch, which is administering the programs that Congress has set up. So there is a lot of reading, a lot of attending when we still could in person, now via Zoom, meetings to learn what's going on. And then what it all comes down to, though, is convincing congressmen to support our position. And that's where communication is key. And that's where we really play the role that I mentioned as educator, that you talk with congressional staff a good bit of the time because they do a lot of the heavy lifting for their congressmen and senators. And on occasion, then you have the one-on-one with the congressman and senator. And that's your opportunity to get your point across very forcefully and very succinctly. And I have had the personal satisfaction working with sugar beet and sugarcane farmers throughout our country. We grow sugar beets in 11 states and cane in 3. And I have gotten to know these people, and I have had the goal in my career to help them be able to pass their farms along to their sons and daughters. And I've been at this long enough that I've seen that happen over and over again. I'm working now with the sons and daughters of farmers that I had worked with years ago. And that just gives me enormous satisfaction to see these farmers be able to sustain their way of life, and to know that I've played somewhat of a role in helping them to achieve that by having favorable government policies.
Well, I'm sure we could spend an entire 10 episodes on the next question I'm going to ask you, which I hadn't intended on asking, but since you are where you are, what has happened to you in your position vis-a-vis the rather large segment of the medical field that is, saying that sugar is horrible for you?
Yeah. Oh, it's really created challenges for us, and there again, it's the education thing, and there is this notion that sugar is the root of all evil. Mm-hmm. But what we try to get across is, we're not suggesting anyone sit down and eat a bowl of sugar. What we're saying is that sugar is it's an ingredient in about 70% of the foods that we eat, and it makes good food taste better. And there is absolutely no evidence that anyone's ever been harmed by consuming sugar in moderation. Moderation is important. I'm an athlete. I still think of myself as one, mm-hmm. and I do not hesitate to have a piece of chocolate cake occasionally because I know that I'm eating a balanced diet and I'm getting some exercise on a regular basis. So it is a challenge to get that across. I think there is a tendency to demonize certain foods. Right now, sugar seems to be in somewhat of a crosshairs. Mm-hmm. But what we try to point out is that sugar consumed in moderation does no one any harm whatsoever.
Well, I hope so, because I've been known to have a few chocolates and ice creams in my life. Yeah. We've talked a bit about your collegiate water polo career, and we've talked a bit about your working career, and you alluded to it a little bit, but can you talk a little bit more about how you feel your collegiate water polo career impacted your working career?
Thank you for that question, George. And I think, not to go back too far in history, but I was born in 1950, and I, when I was about a year old, contracted polio. I was one of the lucky ones. My body fended it off. So many people in my generation did not survive that or were crippled for life. A classmate of mine at Fordham only made it through his junior year. He was harmed by polio as a child and was crippled. He was a wonderful guy who made it to college and through a few years, but then lost his life to pneumonia. But the consequence for me was far less. I just had one leg that was atrophied, and I limped as a kid. And I had a doctor who fortunately suggested swimming as a way to try to build my legs back up, and also a lot of painful leg exercises to try to build my legs back. And I was a pretty bad athlete. My friends called me Spaz. I was always the last one taken for any land sport. But hey, I got in the pool and I discovered that I couldn't fall over when I was in a pool. And I just took to swimming and stuck with it to the point where I was able to walk on to the Fordham team, get a scholarship, and then move on to water polo. But what this did was kind of give me a sense going forward that life deals with certain challenges. But if we don't feel sorry for ourselves and put some work into it, that we can overcome those challenges. And so my transition to the point of thinking of myself ever as an athlete was one that, it wasn't just handed to me. I had to work to get there, to go from spaz to a college water polo player. And so I think that that has helped me in my professional career, in the sense that I have been willing to take on new challenges. I when I look back at each point in my career, that there was kind of a turning point. It was where I decided to, instead of continuing to do what I was doing, to take on a new challenge, that something would come up. And I think to myself, well, I'm not sure I could do that. But I just say to myself, but go for it. You're going to find a way. And so that really has kind of worked out for me in pursuing really different career paths, from being a writer at USDA to being an economist at USDA to being a lobbyist and an economist. And I think that my experience with college athletics kind of prepared me for the notion that I could take on new challenges, and I could manage my time accordingly. I'll acknowledge in the brief bio that I supply whenever I go out. I do quite a bit of public speaking. I've always mentioned in there that I was a college swimmer and water polo player, and you may think, well, how is that relevant to the work that you're doing? Well, I look for that when I'm reviewing resumes of people who are looking to work with us. And I think that people who see that realize, when they see that this guy is or this woman is a former college athlete, that they know how to manage their time, that they know the value of teamwork, and that they also have some sense of taking care of their health. And I think those are all big pluses when you're moving on into your professional career.
Well, get a little bit more specific then. Have you ever found yourself in a situation in your current or past working scenarios where you stopped and said, you know what, I can draw from that, whatever that is, from my college water polo, and then you were able to deal with the situation? Has that ever occurred?
Yeah, I think it has, George, in the sense of something I mentioned, and that was a potential career change, or even within a career, an assignment that comes along and you wonder, could I do that? And, I think back to the challenges that, I had to overcome to become a swimmer at all and to make it onto a water polo team. And I think that that is where you realize that, that you need to believe in yourself, that you may feel intimidated by trying something you've never done before, but to have faith in yourself and to realize that if you really put in the effort, you concentrate on it, you manage your time, that these are things that you can achieve. And I think that my college water polo career kind of taught me that I could take on something new, that I could benefit from the help of a good coach and better players, and that there's a tremendous amount of gratification to be derived from succeeding at something that you really haven't done before.
Well, that's sage words. Now, a lot of people, when they interview people at your station in life, like to ask the question, what would you tell your younger self? But in my case, I like to approach it the exact reverse. I'd like to know what you think that Jack Roney, college water polo player at Fordham, would tell Jack Roney, lobbyist.
That's a fascinating question, George. I haven't really thought of that. I think that I would say that that I could look forward to a really interesting career, or several career paths that I've been on. Life has never been dull, and I think that the young guy could have told the older guy to keep taking good care of yourself, stay in good shape, maintain friendships, and believe in yourself to tackle new challenges and forge those, and look to derive whatever satisfaction you can by helping other people, and that is just so gratifying to have farmers come up to me and say, thank you for representing us Thank you for helping us along. It's just it's a super high to have a feeling like that, and so that's something I think the young me could have told the older me to look forward to.
And sugar in moderation.
And sugar in moderation, of course. Yeah, but don't forget to have some sugar.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have a major sweet tooth, so I'm not going to apologize for it.
Yeah.
My dentist is happy. So finally, we have current college players watching. We have high schoolers and their parents watching who are looking to go to college. The college players are looking to careers after they graduate. What pieces of advice, would you give them? And especially as it relates to what playing college water polo would do for their, ultimate career?
Well, I know that there are some people who say, gee, when you get to college, you've got to just concentrate on the books. You just don't have time for sports. Sports would be a distraction. I thoroughly disagree with that. I'll admit there are times when I'd leave for swimming or water polo practice. I lived in a suite with 7 other guys, and they'd be sitting around talking and having a great time. And I would leave, spend my 3 hours of practice, and meanwhile think, boy, I bet the guys are all hitting the books by now. I bet they're way ahead of me in studying. I get back 3 hours later, and they'd still be sitting around chatting. Now, I know those are valuable conversations, but I just realized that, maybe I'm not necessarily that far behind. And it did force me to manage my time. And it provided a certain discipline I think college kids need. So I think that's a big advantage of playing sports in college. And I think, too, that I alluded to this earlier, how valuable it was to be able to see other campuses, to visit students in other places. Just one quick sidelight is that one of the teams that we used to play was West Point, and this was I played in the '68 to '72 period, which was the height of opposition to the Vietnam War, and a liberal arts college like Fordham, there was plenty of anti-war sentiment at that time, and gee, how valuable it was to go to West Point and to spend some time with the swimmers and water polo players there, and to see that they were dedicating themselves to our protection, that they were not necessarily anti-war, but they were preparing themselves for military careers. And it was really fascinating for us to have the chance to talk with them and to get their perspective on what was going on. So that's a second value, I think, of playing intercollegiate sport, is to have the opportunity to get to other campuses and see what life is like there. And I will also say, going forward, I think there are plenty of people who, when they're looking to hire someone, will note if they've played a varsity sport in college while also nailing down some good grades, that they're going to see, well, that's someone who's disciplined. That's someone who knows how to manage their time. They know the value of teamwork. And they're probably not going to be getting sick a lot of time because they obviously know how to take good care of themselves.
Right.
So I just thoroughly endorse the idea of playing a sport in college. I think as long as you manage your time well, it's only a big plus.
Well, that's a great perspective. He followed up his college water polo career at Fordham by carving out a highly successful 46-year career in agricultural policy. Jack Roney has been my guest today on CWPA Remote. Jack, thanks so much for taking the time to share your insights on how collegiate water polo can impact working careers.
George, thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you today. Thank you for joining us.
Until next time on CWPA Remote, this is George Gross Jr. wishing all of our viewers the very best in and out of the water.